Well, I mean, it's very difficult. I used to do battle damage assessment for a living during wartime, during the Desert Storm. I helped plan major strike packages that would go into Iraq to strike specific targets. I know what it takes to put a strike package together. Um, and then I would evaluate the results, the battle damage assessment using the various intelligence resources that were available, primarily overhead collection. But you get your pilot reports and you get SIGINT. You get to listen to what the enemy says is happening or isn't happening. Things of that human intelligence will factor in, and then later on, I had the opportunity, sort of unique, as a UN weapons inspector, to actually physically inspect the targets that were bombed not too long after they were struck, and to see the difference between reality, meaning I'm on the ground seeing exactly what was struck, talking to the Iraqis about what damage was done, what wasn't done, what I thought had been done when I was a battle damage assessment officer, looking at all the intelligence, what the pilots said that they had accomplished, and what we wanted to accomplish to begin with the strike. So I'm familiar with the entire process, and therefore I would say that history shows that rarely um, do the pilot reports and the statements coming from the people who put the package together ever correlate to reality. It's a lot more difficult to hit a target than people think. And it's even if you hit the target, to hit the target the way it needs to be hit to destroy the target is likewise not something that's easy. On the other hand, we also know that the people on the receiving end don't necessarily want to be honest and open about what happened either. They don't want to admit if the enemy did get a hit in or something. You want to shroud it in secrecy. If the enemy got it wrong, likewise, you don't want to come out too much and say they got it wrong, because you sort of like to allow them to keep getting it wrong. And so, here we are Monday morning quarterbacking this from thousands of miles away with absolutely incomplete data sets. What we can say is that from what we have been able to piece together through various reports, the Israelis launched a strike package of about 100 aircraft. The vast majority of these aircraft were probably missile carriers. According to the leaked intelligence, the weapons of choice for the Israelis were air-launched ballistic missiles, either the ROCs, which is a Raphael system, or one of the Sparrow series. It looks like it's the Blue Sparrow, which is a derivative of what's called the Steel or Silver Sparrow, developed by the Israelis to replicate Iranian Shahed-3 missiles. But either way, these systems aren't designed to be carried to the target. They're designed to be launched far away from the target. And it appears that the Israelis made no effort to penetrate Iranian airspace with their aircraft. That what they did is they launched 3 waves of strikes. The first wave and probably most of the second wave were designed to neutralize air defense systems so that the third wave could go in and hit a target set. The intelligence talks about 16 what's called Golden Horizon, which appears to be the Blue Sparrow air-launched ballistic missiles. These are probably your long-range systems that are ideal for striking targets in and around the capital city of Tehran. Before the strike happened, I wrote a paper which I speculated that the target deck could either be related to ballistic missile production, which would have some relevance, meaning that the Israelis could say we're legitimately striking those targets which produced the missiles that had been fired at us, so this is a legitimate attack, or a decapitation strike, playing on Netanyahu's words about wanting to replicate in Iran what had already been done in Lebanon, the assassination of Nasrallah, etc. But either way, this is not the huge, game-changing, earth-shattering attack that Netanyahu had been promising. He had been saying that, we were going to rock Iran's, boat. This was going to be something that would cause the whole world and the whole region to wake up. No, 16 missiles isn't that much. When one of the first strikes we launched in Iraq against the Iraqis was against the Taji missile production and storage facility north of Baghdad. We used B-52 bombers that fired 35 air-launched cruise missiles, conventional air-launched cruise missiles. And these 35 missiles hit 8 distinct targets. So there's a lot of target replication, et cetera. And it looks like, with 16 Golden Horizon missiles, you're going to be able to hit around 8 targets, because generally speaking, you're going to put 2 systems on each target to get the result that you want. That's just standard targeting practice. And it appears that the Israelis were going for the Parchin missile facility. There's some overhead imagery that suggests that some targets may have been hit on that. And that's it. It doesn't seem that they achieved much of anything. Parchin has had industrial accidents in the past. When you're doing solid rocket motor production, and you have an accident, things go boom dramatically. A lot of flame, a lot of smoke, a lot of thunder, a lot of shaking, and it's visible from Tehran. There's nothing coming out of Tehran that shows Parchin going boom. There's no flame. There's no smoke. The imagery shows what looks like some impact points. I have to tell you, it's very deceptive. If the construction type that you see at Parchin is standard solid rocket motor production, construction. The Iraqis had a plant outside of Baghdad called the Balat al-Shuhada plant. It was a German built solid rocket motor production facility, very similar in layout and design as the Parchin plant. We bombed the hell out of it during Desert Storm and didn't do a damn thing to it. It's just built to absorb, punishment. And the other thing we learned is that the Iraqis were very good at evacuating the valuable production equipment in these facilities. So even when we hit something and got a direct hit, there was nothing in there. My understanding is that the Iranians got a couple hours heads up from the Russians, and that given that they'd be fools to leave, very valuable mixing equipment, in place. And so I believe they, like anybody would have, pre-identified evacuation areas. They would remove this stuff to those evacuation areas, and whatever the Israelis hit, it didn't accomplish anything. That's my understanding. It's also my understanding that the Israelis, again, none of their aircraft penetrated Iran. They weren't designed to penetrate Iran. They weren't intended. They launched from around what we would call Balad Air Base, Salahadin province, north of Baghdad. That's an area that the Israelis were familiar with, because when the United States had a major base in Balad, the Israelis flew in and out of there all the time as part of covert operations, etc. So they're familiar with that operation. They had their F-35 combat air patrol overhead, and the F-35 is supposed to be stealthy. And it's my understanding that the Iranians locked onto the F-35 with an unidentified system, either an S-400 or an Iranian indigenous radar. And it scared the you-know-what out of the Israelis, because you're not supposed to be locking on to an F-35. And the Iranians went, hello, we see you, we're here, and we could shoot you down if we wanted to. And that caused the Israelis to actually abort part of their mission. So not every rocket got off. This was not a successful strike for the Israelis. All the evidence points to this being that. When you read the media, and I'll leave it here, you just see the stupidity of the people that are crafting the pro-Israeli narrative. One of the things that are saying, in addition to knocking out all of the S-300 radars and all the Iranian radars, they say, and this was the Israeli plan. By knocking out these radars, they've made it impossible for Iran to launch future ballistic missile strikes against Israel, because they can't guide their missiles to their target without these radars. And and on Twitter, everybody's going, "Yeah, Israel!" All the way. And I'm like, "You guys don't know anything about ballistic missile guidance and control, do you? Because that ain't how it works." But it just shows the ignorance that's out there. I think Iran came out of this looking pretty good. I don't know how many systems they shot down. I don't know how many they jammed. But I can say with a high degree of confidence that very few of the targets that they were intending to strike were struck. And if they were trying to take out the Parchin ballistic missile production facility, they failed miserably.
Ray, I wanted to bring it to you with this question, given what Scott has said and given this attack that Israel launched on Iran. You were a CIA analyst and you have briefed presidents. I'm curious on what you would say to the current president. I know that Joe Biden is having his difficulties in many respects, however, with cognition and other things. But what would you say to, I guess, the Biden administration, those who are looking on at this, trying to understand what's going on? And what would you tell them about this strike and how they should proceed, given this broader context, too, of what has now been multiple Iranian and Israeli, back and forth with these kind of strikes, and it seems the situation is escalating?
Well, Danny, that's a good question. Here it is, 2024. What Scott was talking about was 1991, Desert Storm. Now, during those days, there was an independent interagency group called the National Photographic Interpretation Center that was manned mostly by CIA, but also DIA and other photo interpreters. And you could pretty much rely on that group to tell you the truth. Why? Because CIA ran it, and CIA in those days was not supposed to have any special glint on things, okay? Now, that dissipated in 1996 when John Deutsch, who was head of the CIA, decided that he wanted to be Secretary of Defense, and his best friend, Bill Perry, said, yeah, this is guaranteed, but you might want to give an extra special thing to the Pentagon. So John Deutsch, the head of this interagency group, which was part of the CIA administratively, gave it kit and caboodle to the Pentagon. Why? No one ever came up with a better idea than that he wanted to ingratiate himself with the Pentagon. Now, why is that big? Well, now the Pentagon is running the assessments, okay? Now the Pentagon, before Iraq, who was doing photographic and other satellite photography, infrared, multispectral radar interpretation? James Clapper. Who picked him? Well, he got in there because Bobby Gates knew he'd do what he's told. What was he told? Find weapons of mass destruction. Now, you don't have to take my word for this. Read Clapper's memoir. He goes into this business about all the pressure he faced mostly from Vice President Cheney to identify possible sites that could have weapons of mass destruction. And we identified 132, and we looked at them, and we couldn't really find any. And so in the end, because the pressure was so heavy, and I was part of this, I acknowledge my role. Well, in the end, we found things that weren't really there. He says that in his book. So they found things that weren't really there. Weapons of mass destruction that my colleague, Scott, did everything he could to tell people, whatever, that there were none there. There was a phony thing to go into Iraq. Well, I make that point because now we're in 2024. 1996, 2024, you don't have an independent photo or satellite imagery interpretation center. You have something that works for the Pentagon. What does that mean? That means it works for Austin, Secretary of Defense Austin. And what are they going to tell him? Well, there's going to be a lot of pressure on these folks to tell them what Austin wants to hear. And so you'll have somebody from this interpretation center write a memoir 20 years from now, say, well, we told them this because we leaned on hard to tell them that. In other words, there's no real reliance on objective assessments of imagery intelligence anymore. And that all goes to personal interests and just a willingness to sacrifice institutional interests. There is no independent imagery analysis group anymore. So what is Austin being told? What would I do? As you originally asked me, would I go down to what's left of NPIC, where the photo interpreters and satellite analysts work, and I would talk to them directly. What do you see? What's going on? Okay. And then I would read the reports that they're forced to issue, and I'd compare them, and hopefully they'd be the same, but they're probably likely to be different. I would tell the president what these experts told me, not what their managers told them, because the managers are likely to tell the president what they want to hear. Now, I was really glad to hear Scott's recapitulation of what went down. When we formed Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, the reason for the sanity word was that email was just coming onto line then. Okay, we're talking 2002 or so. Okay, and so here we are working alone. I'm in my office, and Scott's in his, and Larry Wilkerson is his, and we have it's not collegial anymore. You don't like if I say, hey, I think Cheney is lying through his teeth here. Well, what do you think? You get a sanity check, right? You get a sanity check. No possibility of that. So we did this all by email. Now we don't even have time to do it by email. I haven't talked to Scott like the way we used to do in comparing these things, because Scott is interviewing all the time and I'm interviewing half the time. Okay. So what I'm saying here, Danny, is you perform a real good service bringing us together. I hearing for the first time Scott's latest recapitulation of what happened, and now I'm going to offer my own. And it's a little bit different, but not very much. On October 1st, we had that very widespread attack by Iran. They showed that in ordinary circumstances, Israel should have felt deterred. Deterred, right? Not by nuclear weapons in Iran, but by hypersonic missiles that cannot be defended against, okay? They shot up that airfield real good, okay? I don't know what the president was told about from the bomb damage assessment, but we know that many of those missiles hit that airfield, right? So that's the first. Now, the 2nd of October, Netanyahu and you all get up and say, my God, we're going to strike, we're going to strike. And somebody says, yeah, we're going to strike. It's going to be so bad. It's going to be a surprise at the end of it. You're going to neuter these people, right? Okay. Well, nothing happens. And then we have Yom Kippur. And people say, oh, well, it's probably because of Yom Kippur. They wouldn't do it on Yom Kippur. But then Yom Kippur passes. So here a media analyst or just a political analyst looks at all these things and there's got to be an explanation as to why they haven't done this damn thing, okay? And then the 18th comes, and there's those 2 leaks, major leaks, very embarrassing leaks of what the Israelis were doing in terms of preparing for this thing. So then we finally get the attack, and it's very, very measured, as Scott said, or very not what anybody expected. So why? I go back to what I thought originally, and that is that the Israeli army doesn't want this kind of wooden war. U.S. Army certainly doesn't want it. And has the U.S. Army, has the Pentagon some kind of record in standing up on its own 2 feet and having the kind of cojones to go directly to the president or to Sullivan and say, look, this is crazy? Yes, they do. When was that? Oh, that was about 7 weeks ago. What happened? Well, Tony Blinken wanted to give permission for people to use longer range missilery against the inside of Russia, okay? Not a lot inside Russia, but enough to cross what we thought was a red line that Russia had set. And he was all set to do that. And then the Pentagon said no. They said no the day before in an open press conference, okay? So the next day when Keir Starmer came from London to give Biden the target list and all that kind of stuff and get permission to use his Storm Shadow mesh, it has U.S. software in it, proprietary software. So that's one of the reasons. So what happens? Well, the president's just been told the military doesn't go along with this. Blinken doesn't know what he's talking about. And Sullivan says, listen to the military this time. Long story short, the military overruled the fellow who I think can appropriately be called Netanyahu's lawyer, Tony Blinken, okay? Now, why all this? Well, that created a precedent that was pretty much unprecedented in a long time. And the Israelis are looking on this, and the Israeli army is looking on this. And as I reconstructed, the American army is saying there were 2 4-stars that went to Tel Aviv. What, to participate in retaliating? Because I don't think so. My view, my guess, was they went, look, don't give Netanyahu the idea he can do this with impunity, or worse still, that if he does this and he gets in trouble, we'll go in automatically, okay? We know what a mousetrap is when we see one. We're going to tell Biden, don't be mousetrapped. Now, that would have been idle chatter were it not for that precedent that I just set, the one on Ukraine where the military prevailed. So this is largely guesswork. But the way I look at it, from the 1st to the 18th, they were really kind of deterred by the military being reluctant to join in this fray, and our military telling Israeli military, look, you tell Netanyahu that we're against it, okay? We don't know if we're going to prevail this time. It's very sensitive politically, but we're going to tell Biden, don't do it if you get into dire straits. So if that's what happened, then on the 18th, we have this leak, which Scott would know better than I how much that might have prejudiced these plans that the Israelis had. They were very detailed, and they had to hurt somewhat. So I think the conflation of this report, that the 2 reports that were highly classified and leaked by someone who apparently wanted to stop World War III, big deal. I think between that, the reluctance of the militaries, and the release of these 2 documents accounts largely for the circumscribed nature of this attack. There's one other thing. There's a rumor going around that there were supposed to be 3 waves, right? And the first wave sort of met the kind of conditions that Scott described, including, whoa, these stealth fighters not real stealthy, you know? Maybe couldn't even go trick-or-treating tomorrow, you know? They're not that stealthy, right? And that the last 2 waves were canceled. Now, that comes primarily from Alistair Crook, who's no slouch on these things. So I haven't heard any confirmation of that. And again, this is sort of a sanity check. Scott, could you give me a sanity check on what you think of what Alistair was told?
Look, I have nothing but the highest respect for Alistair Crook. He's just so that people know, he's a former Secret Intelligence Service officer, MI6, with extensive experience in the Middle East, especially with the Palestinian-Israeli issue. He has impeccable sources in the region, and so if he says that he's told something, you sort of say, okay. I mean, it's like getting it as close to, from the horse's mouth as possible. So there's no reason for me to doubt what he's saying. I'd be interested in learning more about what these waves are trying to do. Having planned some strikes in the past, the idea of 3 waves, you never suppress enemy air defense. And what you don't want to do is go in and kick up a hornet's nest and then have that hornet's nest totally active and buzzing and send another wave in. So were these waves going to different target sets? In Iran, one against apparently Tehran. Were there other target sets? It just again, I trust Alistair implicitly, and his sources have historically proven to be 100% correct. Just the military guy in me, this just raises a lot more questions that has my poor little brain begging for answers.